Well, we're lucky to be joined by Phil Hu and my dad, Scott Wadsworth, to talk about tile. Now, Phil did the tile work at our spec house. It was 2 showers, bathroom floors, laundry room floor, kitchen backsplash, and we're talking all about the materials and the parts of the trade and the craft that weren't really explained in quite as much detail in the videos. So this is a good companion episode to the videos in the series. And I'll mention regarding the series, the house is done, the open houses are behind us, and you can expect a video announcement here pretty soon about the sale. We're going to try to keep the audience a little bit up to date on what the sale looks like. And by the way, if you came to the open house, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you. It was really fun to kind of put some faces and names together and meet some actual viewers, people who've been watching the house series for a long time. So thank you very much. I'm sure you've had annoying customers like over your shoulder watch you tile the entire job before, but is that any worse than having cameras right there doing that, or what was that experience like?
Annoying customers, way worse.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you weren't telling me what I'm doing wrong. You were just simply videoing. If I was doing something wrong, you had no clue.
That comes later in the comments, though.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. No. I've had customers that want to kind of hover over the top of you and are constantly asking you questions. And honestly, it doesn't really bother me.
Really?
No. I mean, if they're there to like kind of pick me apart, then it's kind of difficult because it's like, well, you did hire me, I mean, you hopefully have done your research and you realize that I'm proficient at what I do. So, but yeah, I've had customers that want to high grade the tile. Like I set a tile and they're like, oh, I don't like that one. Can you pull that one out, please?
Oh, and wow.
I'm like, oh, okay. And, one of my dad's stories is one of the funniest things ever. It was when he first started out doing this and he really wanted to impress this customer, right? She wanted her to be super happy. And so they were doing a slate floor and there were certain colors that she didn't like in this slate. And so she said, okay, so I really want to be involved with this. And he's like, okay, great. And so he said they started doing it. He said, number one, the job took like 5 times longer than it really should have.
Yeah.
And number 2, it was horrible. It looked
at the end of the day
because you're high grading a natural material. And yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, you can do that. But the reason that you bought slate was for the natural look of it. And when you start pulling out a certain color, inevitably, it always happens. They're like, okay, so I don't like this color. I want to use this under the refrigerator and under here. And I'm like, okay, well, we can do that. But inevitably, we're going to have more of that material that you don't like, and we're going to end up having to use it in like the most obvious spot, like right in the entryway or something like that. And it almost always happens.
It's like a roof. You go by a roof, and when there's not a color match between different bundles or 2 different truckloads, and you get this shade, and then the next shade kicks in. Oh, right there with 2 different product runs from the factory.
That's more innocent because when the sun's on you, you just grab the next thing. You don't know, but when the person's like, let's take that one out. I mean, when it's done, it's sort of like, well, remember that tile?
Yeah. Right.
It's like you got to really trust the order that can come from randomness. Just don't think about it. Let it be random and almost trust that more than your own.
Yeah. It always cracks me up when people are like, I want it to be random. And I'm like, okay, so I start setting it random. They're like, well, no, I don't like that. And I'm like, oh, so you want a random pattern? That's essentially what you want. Okay.
Yeah, dealing with the public's a thing, especially when you're in there putting the finished product on. I mean, the painters, people watch people paint, people watch people put the tile in. They don't watch the studs get banged up.
Oh, sorry. Pull yours in and like a little more if you can.
Okay, balance the volumes.
What about these porcelain tile? That has to help this because they're all good. Well, I guess you said natural material is worse, but what about with porcelain tiles? Is that aspect of like pleasing people not make quite as big an impact?
Yeah, I think obviously with the manufacturing of porcelain tiles and their ability to mimic what natural stone and really the parts of the natural stone that the people like. Yeah, and it becomes much more uniform. So you don't have so much variance in a product, right? Yeah. So you take it out of the box and 90% of them look very, very similar. So it doesn't matter if you just start throwing them down out of the box.
Yeah.
So I hadn't thought of that, but when they're mimicking a natural pattern, they take out the extremes of what nature does. I would guess, and have most of their product, 90% of it, right in the mid zone where most people will be happy and they don't have as many eccentricities in what nature would do?
I would say for the most part, that's what the manufacturers are shooting for. They're not shooting for the extreme ends, but then some of them actually do go for that extreme end because some people love that the movement, like through Carrara marble, that really defined veining.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they really capitalize on that aspect of it.
I know Dustin takes refuge in that when he's stamping concrete. If something doesn't go quite right with the stamp, rocks are weird, and just keep moving, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, these natural stones, they are beauty, but man, in addition to all these issues, but there's also parts where they're super weak. Like, aren't those veins, like, it's almost... There's breaks that happen right there. I got to think this porcelain tile technology overall has just made tile guys' lives easier.
Yes and no. As far as what you're talking about, as far as the uniform density of the material itself, yeah, it's become much easier when you're shoving down on a corner of a piece of porcelain. You're not going to crack it along that veining line, right? And so, yes, in that aspect, it has. But what it did also introduce is a very difficult time bonding to this product because a porcelain tile is so dense. I mean, the absorption rating on it is almost like glass.
Oh,
it's really close. And so a standard, one of your lower grade thin sets, or some of the thin sets they used to have out on the market, weren't getting the mechanical bond to the back of the tile because it didn't, the fingers of the concrete couldn't get into
nothing to grab onto.
No pores. Yeah.
Correct. And so with that, you had to get new thin sets with all these additives to it, this polymer and all this kind of stuff had to be brought to the table in order for them to bond to the backside of these tiles.
Interesting.
And with that, just, comes with a whole slew of new
things to learn.
Yeah.
Pitfalls.
New products that you have to do trial and error on and trying to figure out, where does this fit in my company? Does it fit? Which one do my guys like to use? Which ones do my guys hate using?
Yeah.
It becomes a real dance as far as how we're going to bond to the backside of these. And then now they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which causes even more problems.
So what do you mean now? Just like as far as the trend go, like bigger tiles are in trend, or now they have the technology to make bigger ones, or what's going on with that?
Both.
Really?
Yeah. So people love, the Achilles heels of tile has always been the grout. Everybody hates the grout lines, right? Because they're hard to clean. You got to seal them. On and on and on. And so obviously, if you have a 12 by 12 tile and you're installing a floor, 40 square feet, you have just a vast amount of grout lines.
Yeah.
But as you start doing a 2 foot by 4 foot tile in that area, all of a sudden you've cut those grout lines down so much that the homeowner's like, oh, well, this is what I want. I want something that looks like tile, but is low maintenance, like a slab or like a concrete floor or whatever you want to put into that. But I don't think that this trend is necessarily going away.
Yeah.
I think this one's here to stay. Everything seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And with the technology for them to make these rectified tiles so you can do 16th inch grout lines.
Yeah.
It's become pretty mainstream now.
Interesting. And they're flatter now and no.
I don't think that I'm necessarily going to say
they're not flatter.
What they do, what does happen when you start using the thinner tiles is there's more flex in the tile itself.
Oh.
And so that's when these leveling systems that everybody's gone to now for installing all these large format tiles come into play, because a 12 by 12, you can't really twist it, right? When you're installing it. It doesn't want to bend, not that much. So these larger ones, when you got a 4 foot run, you can actually push the center of that tile down about 1/8 of an inch.
Really? And the thin set will hold it there?
As long as you put a leveling clip on it and put it into place, it has enough bond to the backside of that tile to actually hold it in place when you remove that. It's actually what I'm doing right now. I'm doing several thousand square feet of 2 foot by 4 foot tiles, and we have this leveling system. And without it, you could do it, but it'd be very difficult because as much as you can push and manipulate this tile to have the edges, the four corners maybe lining up with the other ones, that center of that tile sometimes is domed.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you can't shove the center down without shoving
the
the edges down without those leveling clips.
An eighth of an inch is enough to feel if you're walking. A person could kind of trip on that.
Or rolling a walker or a wheelchair or anything. Anything like that.
Or a table that doesn't that rocks, or a stool or something.
Or rolling a pallet jack through there and chipping the edge of that tile because it's an eighth of an inch taller.
Good call.
So
I want to reset a little bit, and then we'll probably pick back up here. But will you, first of all, kind of tell the story of how your dad started the business, and then I want to hear again the story of you and the family curse you told me about that kind of led you into tile as opposed to maybe talk about Day Food Tile, how your dad got into this, and then we'll pick back up in modern day once you get to that point.
So my dad moved up here from Southern California, and they moved out to the Milo area where my mom owned a piece of property. And so obviously...
So Milo is a long ways from anything here. Milo is up, it's southeast, a good long drive through beautiful country up to South Umpqua. It's remote.
It's about an hour from Roseburg.
Remote. Yeah.
And so anyway, that's where actually I was born. I was born in Milo. And when he got here, he obviously had to work and support his family. And so he had multiple jobs. I think he worked for the Forest Service at one point in time and had a landscaping business. But in Oregon, that's a little bit too seasonal. And so he started doing bathroom and kitchen remodels. And as he's getting into this, he's obviously trying to establish his subcontractors that he wants to use. And he noticed that there was a huge lack of tile contractors in the area. And so it was something that interested him. So he went ahead and started apprenticing with some of these companies around town.
This was in the 70s.
Yeah. So he started doing this about 1980 is about when it all kind of came to about. And so anyway, so he started to start doing showers and kitchen backsplashes and floor, just whatever he could get, that's what he was taking, obviously. And his nature is just he doesn't do anything halfway.
That's right.
If he is going to invest his time in it, he's going to do it to the very best of his ability. And that's the way he's always been and what he's always done. And so he's very creative. He's exceptionally creative. His mind just kind of works differently than most people's. And so that and his customer care is second to none. He takes care of customers like nobody I've ever seen. And so with that, the clientele just started to build and his reputation preceded him. And, we've been doing this now, for 42 years and not going anywhere, not stopping this. But what you're talking about, the family curse is, so I've been working with my dad since I was about 8 years old, every weekend. Well, not every weekend, but a lot of my weekends.
It seemed like every weekend.
It seemed like every single weekend. All my summers. And so
was he like, we just got to stop by this job real quick and just do this thing. It'll take an hour. We'll be back. And then you get home at
oh no, he was completely upfront about it. He says, you're going to work today. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to work today. Great. I wanted to go fishing, but fine. So anyways, I was working with him all these summers and so I finally graduated and he says, well, you going to go to college? And I'm like, nope. And he says, well, then go get a job. And so I start putting in applications and I don't get any hits or anything like that. And I'd always had this thought of I was either going to go into working for him or I was going to go to culinary school. And so I told my grandma that one day. And my grandmother and my grandfather owned a Chinese restaurant in Southern California and in Hawaii. And so when this happened, she goes, okay, well, she says, if you're thinking about going to culinary school, I have to tell you that our family has a curse on it. And I'm like, okay. And she says, the curse is that in every generation, somebody will be in the restaurant business. And I said, so you're telling me I shouldn't go into the restaurant business, Grandma? And she says, if you want to prolong the curse, that's up to you. So,
but it can end here.
Yeah. So, anyways, that being said, you know, I love to cook, and she says, if you love to cook, don't go into the restaurant industry. And I'm like, all right, fine.
Boy, that's wisdom.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you love to play music, don't be a pro musician.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so I followed in my dad's footsteps, and it was one of those things where, you know, he started this to feed me. That was the whole drive of this, obviously. But then it became something a lot more personal to me. It was like, not only did he start this for me and my mom, but this is something he built from scratch. And it was not there, and now it's the business that it is today.
Yeah.
And I just think I would have felt super guilty had I been able to do it and not kept that going, you know? And so I'm really proud to continue to do that and be a part of that.
And you have your own affinity for it. I mean, so OCD, right? I wish I had more OCD, more relentless. I mean, your truck is clean. Mine is not. And okay, but I'm just, and it does, you don't, so we did a book on finding a contractor, the thing you need to know. And not every great contractor drives a spotless truck. I mean, look at Dustin. Best concrete finisher there is, and there's only room in that truck for him. That's it. Okay. But so I'm not saying these things are always tightly connected, but you do really pay attention to keeping things spiffy, and the final product is spiffy. And your dad hammered that into you, but he didn't have to hammer too hard. I'm thinking there's something in you where that was kind of that gravitated to that at some point.
I don't think he had to hammer it into me because I grew up with it.
There you go.
So would I have had the tendencies had I not grown up in it? Probably not. My truck may be clean, but if you look at the inside of my van, well, let's just not look at the inside of my van. Let's do that instead. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in this. I grew up in these very narrow tolerances, you know, like with the shower that we did at your house. We're doing 16th inch grout joints, right? And so if you're doing a wrap on 3 walls, and one wall is off a 16th of an inch, you're off an entire grout line, and you can see it. And so my tolerances just have always been pretty slim, you know, feeling a 16th of an inch of lip in a tile, you feel that, and you have to adjust that because you're going to feel it as you walk on it or as you run your hand across it. So yeah, I think tile setters in general have that kind of tendency, that OCD tendency. I know all of my guys do. We're all really weird about that kind of stuff.
You can't get away with it. Other trades are behind drywall, and get away with it is not like a slur. It's kind of like, no, literally, you can get away with it, but you can't. This is like the thing that they're going to put bare feet on every day. And if you can feel it, they can feel it. You know, you don't have to be an expert to, like you said, run your hand over it and feel that little rub.
Right.
The first time I was on a job with your dad, and he wasn't working for me. I wasn't doing work that came ahead or was connected with his, but I was doing work on the outside of a house, and he had just done the tile on the floor of a laundry room retrofit or something. And the customer was a detailed customer, and was a person who didn't mind holding your feet to the fire for aspects of your work that other people wouldn't even notice. He's one of those, you know, just his personality. And I came in one time, and this customer was standing next to your dad, kind of chewing at him, because your dad had a different tile setter put the floor in this laundry room, and there was a little bitty lip in between 2 floor tiles. And as I walked away, I just heard Dave say, "Yep, you're right. I'll have that out of there tomorrow afternoon." Boom. No, you know, no minimizing or discounting the guy's concern. Just boom, got it. That'll be fixed tomorrow afternoon. And I think you guys have gone back and done work for this person again, which is uncommon because that particular person has expectations that a lot of people just can't meet. And I thought, put a check in the plus column for Dave Who. Way to go. He didn't bristle. He didn't excuse. He just dealt with it. It was neat.
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly what I'm saying. My dad's customer care is second to none. I mean, he's exceptionally patient, and just really, at the end of the day, wants the customer to be happy with what they have. And you can't discount somebody's problem with something that you've done. If they have a problem with it, they have a problem with it.
That's right.
There's no point in having a discussion with them to see if you can convince them that
That's
their
right.
view on that is wrong.
Yeah.
right.
If they don't like it, they're paying you.
Yep.
Fix it.
Yeah.
That's right.
There you go. All right, so let's talk about tile a little more, and I think we kind of have to start with systems because we did a Schluter system. That's what our viewers saw.
Right.
That's obviously only one of a million, but that's probably what a lot of our questions are going to be about. So, so before we kind of really talk about Schluter and stuff, let's talk about some of the other options, because obviously when you were helping your dad at 10 years old on the weekends, you were doing something else. In fact, I remember one of the first shower I ever demoed. I was just like, oh, no big deal. And all of a sudden I ran into chicken wire and I was like, what the heck is going on back here? And I feel like every shower I ever demoed, there was something else going on,
something different
behind it. And I kind of, even before, we did this job, I just always thought of shower tiles as like, who knows what they're going to come up with next. It felt like there's always like, everybody had it's like a recipe, like at a restaurant, like this is our recipe of how we do it. So anyways, maybe kind of walk through like some of the big systems, some of the main ones you've done. And if you want to reiterate at some point, why you're using Schluter more often these days. But how did it all start out?
Well, I mean, I think that the first real system that there was is the old mud set, right? So that's exactly what you're talking about with the chicken wire or an expanded lath of some sort. So what you would have, generally speaking, is they'd put up green board and
water resistant sheetrock.
Correct. And then they'll put up 15-pound felt, staple the chicken wire to the sheetrock or the expanded lath if that's what they're using, and then you make up fat mud, which is people all have their different mixes that they use, but our standard was 4-part sand, 1 part cement, and a 1/2 part of lime. And you mix this up to a consistency that you can spread onto the wall with a hawk and a trowel. And you spread this on around 1/2 inch thick, and then you tap screeds into the mortar on the wall to get perfectly plumb and the correct depths and all these things.
When you say screed, just like a little
little
furring strip?
Yeah, they're little. We used to take cedar and just rip it down to like 1/8 or 1/4 inch thick, and then you just tap those in with a level and a rubber mallet into that mortar bed that your screed lines that you're putting up.
Got it.
And then you fill in on either side and in the middle, and then you take a straight edge and you rod that off to your screed lines.
Amazing.
And you have a perfectly plumb and flat, usually, application. And so with that also came, before you even did that, you had to go in, you had to do a pre-slope, right, to your drain on your floor.
On the floor.
Right, which is the same, it's the exact same mix pretty much that I used in the video. But what you're doing is, at that part, you have a 2-part drain. So you have the bottom flange that's been usually screwed to the floor, right? And then, so you pre-float down to that, and then you put in a Croyloy pan, or which is what we always use, which is a really thick rubber membrane assembly. And you put that down to the drain, fold it up the walls, and staple off, making sure that you don't have any penetrations below the curb line and all that kind of stuff. And then you put the drain assembly together. You cut your hole, put your drain assembly together after you've glued that Croyloy pan down to that bottom flange. Put all that together, and then we would usually float our walls at that point in time.
Protect that Croyloy. Get in there.
We'd be doing the wall. Well, yeah, we would put down like something to protect that, but then we'd float the walls.
Will you explain float the walls?
Float the walls is when you're actually mix up the fat mud, that mix that I just said, and you have a mud board in there.
Okay, so it's chicken wire before this, and then you float it, and then it's mud, and you're screeding it.
Correct.
As you described.
Correct. Yeah. So you float all the walls, and then usually the following day we would come back and we would float the shower floor exactly how I did in that video. And so that was the old school method, right? And it's been tried and true for years and years.
Pause, comma. That's very similar to stuccoing the outside of a building. You're kind of putting in your scratch coat,
Yep.
and then you're putting screeds in, where stucco guys will just eyeball and straight edge it, but very similar to an exterior stucco.
It
But
honestly
probably
sounds like an awesome shower. I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's probably super strong, and that nothing's getting through that felt. That sounds like a pretty good shower.
It is. There is absolutely no argument with that. It is I've gone back to our own floats that we've done, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and there's not a crack one. The corners look great. Everything's great except it's dated, right? And they want to update.
Yeah.
And so for a standard shower application, I will be the first one to tell you that a mud set shower is fantastic. It is. It's the way it's always been done.
Is mud set the way you would refer to that system?
Yeah,
mud
that's
set?
a mud set system. The drawback to it is it's extremely labor intensive. It's
work.
It's hard on your body. It really is.
Yeah, it's a lot of mud you're mixing up.
It's a lot of weight.
A
lot of repetitive motion with a lot of weight.
Yeah, your shoulders.
You bet.
Smearing that all up.
It's a stucco life, man. It's
Right.
hard. Except you can't. You're not shooting it on and troweling it off.
No.
Oh man.
So that part of it is one of the reasons why I enjoy Schluter so much, because Schluter is so much more lightweight. But the other, where it really kind of turned for our company, was we live in an area that's a lot of retirement age people. Right. We have a place that people come to retire. And with age comes the need for barrier-free showers. And it's not just age. I mean, I tore my Achilles, and it would have been great to have a barrier-free shower that I wasn't hobbling in and out of my tub, So what we started to really specialize in was wheelchair and barrier-free showers. So with that application, we started to have a real problem trying to figure out how we were going to integrate our waterproofing
Without a curb.
Without a curb in a mud set application.
Because it used to be that liner, but that liner laying flat.
Yeah, that liner would go up and over the top of the curb, and you essentially created a little pool inside your house.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden you remove that curb, and there's nothing keeping that water in except for the slope of your floor. So even if you had the opportunity in a new build or even in a remodel to drop the floor a couple inches in the shower area, it was still a problem how you were going to run the Croyloi pan out of the shower onto the main floor, which has to be waterproofed as well because you have a barrier-free shower now.
Yeah.
Because you can't glue Croyloi down to the floor and then glue your tile directly to that.
Yeah.
So you can't drive nails through it because it's your waterproof membrane. So we started to have this real issue trying to figure out how we were going to do this. And so by that point, we were already starting to use 1/2-inch hardy backer instead of floating shower walls. Right?
What year do you think this is all kind of happening, or what decade maybe?
Oh man, I'd have to say it's probably been a good 20 years that we were still floating, but we were kind of integrating into the backer board, cement backer units. And so we were using hardy backer and trying to figure out how to integrate that with our waterproofing. And so all of a sudden we got into all these painted on membranes, right? Everybody has one. Laticrete has one. Customs has one. Ardex has one.
Yeah.
And so the one that we started using RedGuard, and didn't have any failures, but we always had these questions. There was always something that happened during the installation of this that made us question whether this was the right system for us.
Yeah.
Right. And so the one that we really landed on was a product by Ardex. It was 8+9.
That's what your dad had me use in that shower that I put in out at my mom's apartment.
And that product worked really, really well, and it still works really well. The rub for me and for my dad was we want to be able to back up whatever we put in somebody's house, right? So we're using hardy backer for the walls or Wonderboard or whatever backer board unit you want to talk about, but we're using cement board on the walls. We're floating the shower pan sometimes. Sometimes we're using something called the Tough Form pan, which is a fiberglass pan that's got an integrated 1/4 inch per foot fall in it. But we're using all of these different manufacturers. I'm using a Customs thin set. I'm using maybe a Mapes Grout,
Even the drain is like some like
Yeah, exactly.
other company.
Right. And then I'm using Ardex for my waterproofing. And all of a sudden we've got 5 and 6 different manufacturers in one shower.
Frankenstein.
So what happens if I have a failure? Everybody out there knows if I have a failure, every manufacturer I use is going to do this.
Yeah.
It's their fault. It's their fault. You didn't use this. You didn't do this. You didn't do this.
Yeah.
And even if we're just going to stop and go and just look at Ardex in itself, I don't think that there's a manufacturer out there really that puts out a product that fails.
Right.
They've gone through so many
That's
millions
right.
of dollars of testing on these products. They don't put one out that fails in a lab.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, enter into the real world where you have dust and temperature and humidity and all
Kids
these different
and
installer error.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem with all of these products is installer error. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Rarely when you have a claim is it something that the manufacturer did wrong.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say they're not going to back you up,
Right.
but you did something wrong more than likely.
Yeah.
So in a paint-on application, the entire waterproofing that you're using is completely reliant on you following every step correctly and getting the correct mill thickness, not having a pinhole. I mean, literally, it is just a pinhole and you have a problem in your shower.
Yeah.
And so I had kind of dug my heels in with Schluter for years. We'd had a bad experience with them. And so I was really kind of jaded. But I had this one rep that was Don Corliss. And that guy was just relentless. He said, come to our seminar, And I was just like, finally, the last one that we went to, he had called us down there, and it was when I met Ken. And I said, I don't know why you guys have me here. You guys have never answered my questions as to how your system is superior to everybody else's. I understand that you have the solution for what we're wanting, but you can't give me the data that I want to tell me why it's waterproof. Well, they finally were able to give me the technical information that I had been looking for, and we decided, all right, we're going to give this a shot. And that was when we made the switch to Schluter. And I'd have to say that's been probably 10 years ago now.
That's cool. And it's all that whole first half of the conversation is obsolete now for you guys, because with people seeing this by saying system, if you didn't watch it, it's every aspect. It's the drain assembly, it's all the glues, it's the precise thin set mixes. Yeah. It's the whole, it's everything under one roof, right?
Minimizes installer error potentially down to 0 if you follow their instructions.
Yeah, I mean, all of a sudden the waterproofing goes back to a membrane again, or not a paint-on, but an actual like Croyloy membrane, right? So we're not using Croyloy, but they give you a sheet good that's waterproof.
Yeah.
So now I've got a 3-foot roll by however long I need it to be that is waterproof in and of itself. I don't have to paint over that entire amount of square footage for it to be waterproof.
With no pinholes.
Right.
Yeah.
It is waterproof.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there is still the opportunity for installer error. If you don't do the seams correctly, if you don't treat your corners correctly.
Sure.
But it minimizes
the
areas that could potentially fail on you.
Yeah.
So that's why that, coupled with I can pack the entire set of wallboard in with me in one trip, and if I rub up against a wall, I didn't just take the paint off the wall or tear a chunk out of the trim.
If you're remodeling a shower in a nice house, you're not mixing concrete in the house,
right,
or at least not much,
right?
And you're not carrying sacks of cement up and down finished stairs, and
yeah, exactly. So it's just made my career longer, or the ability for me to do this career longer. I can now, well, my dad's, he's 67 now.
Wow.
And, He's still going strong.
He can do Schluter.
Yeah,
amazing.
he loves it. He
Yeah.
absolutely loves it. You know, and so that's why we landed on Schluter. It's not to say that any of the other products out there don't work, because they do.
You bet.
You know, I've seen them work. I've done them and they've worked. Just all of the different applications that we want to do, I can do all of them with Schluter.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can just have my warehouse have just, you know, extra foam board and extra all set and extra Curdy band and Curdy mat and Detra and all that kind of stuff, if I can have all that and I don't have to worry about, oh, I didn't get enough of this or I didn't get enough of that and I don't have it in my warehouse, now I got to order it.
Yeah.
You know, I can just have one product that has everything that I need.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's interesting. The comments in the video, they busted my chops because they could hear I was pretty enthusiastic about this. Because right away, I could see that advantage. I thought, now, if I was a tile guy, I would love having a one-stop shopping solution instead of having to go to all of these different reps, all of these different suppliers, all of these different, all of it. I thought, yeah, and seeing the, anyway, I right away kind of bought in hook, line, and sinker. Number one, because you and your dad liked it. That's really all that was kind of the confirmation from the encyclopedia of tile setting that I put a lot of confidence in. Okay, if they like Schluter, I like Schluter. And then watching it happen, I was like, man, all of a sudden, I'm a fanboy. And this is the first time I've seen it go in. And I guess that came out a little too vividly in my tone. I don't know.
The funny thing is, it's like a sponsored video, and you would think that they paid us like a ton of money. It's like, actually, we should have just bought it because it's not that expensive. It would have cost us whatever, $1,000.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have had to put the teeny thing. They gave us this, which like instantly makes people
discredited.
It totally like makes all their radars go off.
Yep.
And it's like, believe me, it would. Can we just pay him for it? Because it's not worth it.
Yeah.
But you got to choose something. And so,
Exactly.
But the point is, it was not like the world's most lucrative sponsorship. It was like one pickup truck load of foam board. And
so let's talk about a lucrative sponsorship. Kelly Guido and Umpqua Sand and Gravel gave us a lot of dollars worth of concrete and rock right at the beginning. And you guys went to their Facebook page and I talked to him. I'm taking him through the house like next week. He's just so happy. But compared to that, like most of the other sponsorships were relatively small, especially Schluter.
Not to dish Schluter, because if they hey, we'll give you a semi truck full of Schluter, it'd be like, no, we're good. We don't want it.
I'll take that.
Yeah, you can take it. And honestly, we don't really want their money either, because that's not how we like to do those things. But the point is, people they definitely can notice when.
And I kind of felt bad because so many of the voices got sidetracked by that they weren't recognizing what a great job you were doing with those 16th-inch grout lines, man.
Well, I think, and I think I posted a comment on the very first video, and it was, they said, you sounded like a salesman. And I said, well, yeah, kind of, because, you're very upfront when you don't know the trade exclusively.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to go ahead and bring in the people that you trust, and you're going to listen to them. And so that being said, I kind of am a salesman. I sell my trade. I sell my craft, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm passionate about a product, which I am about Schluter, then I'm going to sell that system.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, if a customer comes to me and says, I want to use this instead, I'll entertain that all day long, and I'm going to, figure out which one works. And if that works for me, great, I'll do it. But if it doesn't, I'll say, hey, you know what? You should probably find somebody that's comfortable doing that system for you. But when I was explaining to you Schluter, it did sound kind of like a sales pitch, because that's what I do.
Sure.
It's not intended to be like, oh, let's pump Schluter. Believe me, I can't get their product right now. They're exceptionally popular, right?
Yeah.
They don't need me and you pumping them like
that's
that,
right.
It's simply because that's what we do. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go through a couple questions now that I had either at the time or that I still have from some viewers about the system, and a lot of these probably apply to all tile work. So feel free to speak generally if it's applicable outside of Schluter. Okay. And the first one is from Kurskiv 12, and he's wondering how you decouple tile from the OSB with that mat. In other words, that mat glues to the OSB. Correct. The tile glues to the mat, and we're talking about it like there's some kind of like decoupling happening. But can you explain how that works? Because the mat is tough. I mean, it's not like it's like ball bearings in it or something.
So it's an uncoupling membrane is what
Oh,
it's
okay.
called.
Sorry. Yeah.
So what it is so I'm going to speak specifically about Schluter, but because it's the one that I know the best. But there's several of them out there. Customs has one, Laticrete has one, I think Mapei has one. But an uncoupling membrane is simply a membrane that you put down that pretty much gives a barrier between your substrate and the tile itself. So on Schluter's uncoupling membrane, there's a fleece backing on it, right? It's a white fleece backing. The fleecing on the back is welded through a gluing process, hot welded to the backside of that plastic. But there's an air gap in between that fleece and in the standard Ditra, it's actually these little dovetailed squares, but it's only bonded to the bottom side of those ridges. So
there you go.
There's the negative. You see what's on top, but there's a negative on the bottom of this that's actually bonded to it. And so when you're gluing down, you're actually gluing to essentially a floating section of that floor.
At those little protuberances.
Correct. So everything, the subfloor can move independently.
Just a little bit, which is all you need.
Right, exactly.
If it pulls apart half an inch, it's going to rip apart. But if it just shifts a little bit, expansion, contraction.
Correct. Yeah, and so it is very much the same as like the sand strata method when you're doing a paver, right? So you have 4 locked in sides, you fill in the section with sand, you smooth it out, you put your pavers in there, and the sand compresses so much that it supports the weight, right? But anything that happens in the ground beneath, it doesn't transfer up through because it's sand.
Oh, that's neat. So even the mat feels, and I know you viewers didn't feel it, but it feels tough and like just strong. But in other words, it can move inside the product itself.
Correct.
Separate from the thin set or the glue on each side.
Correct. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, next question, kind of moving up the system here. This is from Mega Rawberry. Is there a reason for doing the wall tile first? I've always heard to tile the floor first and lap the wall tile to prevent water penetration. Someone else talked about it like a shingling style.
Well, first and foremost, I did actually tuck the shower floor underneath the wall. If you look in the video, when I'm stacking the bottom course, I actually took scrap of the floor tile, put it down, and wedged off of that.
I see.
So there's a gap.
Space.
There's a gap at the floor for me to do that. But it's not because of the shingling effect.
Right.
It's a cleaner look for me to have my floor tile tuck up underneath because it's harder to stand back and look at a grout line that lands on top of your floor, right? Because you can see that, or you can't see that as easily as you can look straight down, right? If your floor tile butts to the wall and you have an inconsistent grout line, you can see it really easily. It's much more forgiving if your floor tile is underneath the wall tile.
It's like a painter cutting in the ceiling and the wall line. They have a sequence they do that in so that the discrepancy in their cut line is harder to see. Yeah, same
Correct.
deal.
But so there is no shingling in the application of a tiled shower.
Yeah.
Because more than likely, okay, so
well, he just means like on the corner, just that overlap.
Right. Some people think that they have, but some people have this idea that if you lap things correctly in a shower, that they're going to shed the water properly.
Like on a roof, no.
That's not going to happen because if you're going to leak water down to the waterproofing, which it's designed to get down there, your water is going to get to your waterproof membrane. It's going to go through the grout lines, epoxy grout, sanded grout, any of those grouts, they're not waterproof.
That's right.
And more than likely where that water is going to migrate first is a small hairline crack on an inside corner at your floor and shower application. And it doesn't matter if that crack goes straight down or straight back.
That's right.
You have so much surface tension with that water and that small crack, it's going to wick back there no matter what.
Because you have a grout line going back under that wall at every you have grout lines going perpendicular. You have grout lines. It's a non-issue.
Right.
Oh, so why not do the floor tile first, anyways? If you're shimming up and planning it just to protect them and keep them safe, or why start with walls first? This is basic level, like first day on the job. But
no, it's preference.
Preference.
There is no right or wrong.
Oh.
It's whatever you prefer. I make a mess on the floor. If I set my shower floor first and I don't protect it 100%, I'm going to get thin set down onto the tile and into my grout lines, and then I have an issue. So if I don't set my shower floor until the very last, it stays the cleanest for me. So that's the only reason that I do it that way. I've done shower floors first. It
works.
Each their own. I mean,
that makes sense.
It's like the cabinet guy. Some guys put the uppers up first. Some guys put the lowers in first. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and for Mega Rawberry and anybody else who thought that the real, they wouldn't have the question. I must not have filmed that super tight of you shimming up the exact thing and then and I guess installing that tile underneath. Did we get that in the video? Because that's a tiny moment, but that really
it's in the video, but it's hard. It's hard to see it. It's not like you're like right over the top of me showing me tuck that tile underneath, you know?
And it was that mosaic tile and sheets anyhow. So it's not like it was a big, single piece. Yeah.
But on the shower bench, they're correct. The walls went in first.
Yeah.
And then my the top of my bench went to my walls.
Yeah.
Is it a failure? No. Is it an issue? No. Did my cuts have to be more precise than my floor cuts were? Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I liked about that film angle right there? It showed the nice slope on that bench. You could see those tapered side pieces run up. That bingo, water's coming off of there.
Yeah, filming you, Phil, and filming tile in general was one of the easiest in a lot of ways because you were in one spot and there was light overhead.
Lots of light.
And it worked well. But one of the challenges was you were almost always in the way of where the action was. And there's no going to the other side. Like with the roofers, I could always or someone else, I could always move. But it was right there. And so on the edges, when you were reaching, it was pretty much the best shot to kind of see what was going on.
Right.
I got to imagine when you're training somebody, this is a little bit of a challenge too, because
do it like this and they can't see
our
you.
shower was big. You could fit 2 guys in there, but there's a lot of showers that are probably smaller. So you're training people and you're kind of like, oh, geez. All right, come in here, I guess.
Yeah. You'd be surprised at how many guys you can fit in a 30 by 30 shower.
Okay, let's not talk about that on this show, okay?
All right. Here's a question, and this is I'm probably skipping a bunch of steps, but that's okay. Around the grout, this guy Nicholas Lujan or Lujan, why not just use a damp toothbrush to clean the squeeze out hole installing the tile? English as a second language, probably. Then there's no risk of penetrating the membrane. Okay, what I think he's asking is, you guys went back and cleaned with the razor. And I think I'm thinking, and you did, I guess, clean before, but he's wondering why not do it with a toothbrush when it's damp instead of doing it with a razor later.
Yeah, he's right. I mean, you can do it that way. And, what it doesn't show in that video is me washing it with a sponge, right? But I think I there's a lot of flack on some of those videos saying, a real tile setter doesn't have a messy grout joint or, whatever. And that's fine. But when you're installing these things and you're in production mode, right? It's get the wall up, right? Sometimes you don't have the time to get every single spec. Now, could you? Yeah, I could. But it would probably cut into my production.
Yeah, and leave the thin set getting hard and crusting over and break the flow up, and then your phone rings and
right. And then also, I mean, one of the things is I top set my spacers in that application, right? Which means those were T spacers that I was using, and you could theoretically shove them into the T joint that they're supposed to be used or they can be used.
Oh, I see.
Oh, and then do you pull them out later still, or you just thin set over?
No,
them?
Those are actually leave-in spacers, the ones that I was using. You can, they're super hard, so you don't run the risk of compression. Like the old rubber ones, if you pull them out, you could compress that joint because they were just rubber.
Oh.
So these are super hard plastic, so you can leave them in. But one of the issues that I have with leaving them in or using them in that application is a lot of tiles, these were not, but a lot of tiles they have a bevel to the edges of them, right? So they start out, if you butted them tight together at the base of the tile, you're going to have, it's going to be touching, but at the top, there might be a 1/16 of an inch of gap. So if you don't top set your spacers and you rely on shoving those in just so every time, you can vary your grout line. If you shove it in, if one joint you shove it in all the way to the back of the tile, you maybe space the face of that 3/16 of an inch. If the other one you just pushed in flush to the face of the tile, then maybe you're only a 1/16 of an inch there. So I always top set my spacers so that I get the same depth of spacing every single time. But with doing that, it eliminates my ability to go back with a scrub brush and scrub those joints because I have spacers in there.
Sure,
you can't just like go nuts wiping it.
Right, because I'm going to knock all my spacers out.
Yeah.
And so there's, ideally, when you're done with a installation, it's spotless.
Yeah.
Realistically, I never have that.
And it's like either way, you'd be going back, just checking, and doing maybe only one or two. It's like no matter what that step. So in terms of production, just do all the steps in one time. Okay, now I'm going to really clean. So I could see why it makes sense to sort of not stress about that.
Yeah, I think in reality, if I were to be that clean and meticulous and making sure that all of the joints are perfectly ready to grout the next day, it would add 5-6 hours to my install time easily.
Yeah.
But I can detail that shower in about 30 minutes.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Now, do I run the risk of penetrating my waterproofing? Yes, I do. Do you have to be careful? Yes, you do. But there's a give and take there for me, and it's more productive and profitable for me.
So there's the answer. A guy analyzes his workflow. He figures out what works best, and at the end of the day, what it is that leaves the most money in your account.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you just charge more for your showers too. I'd rather not pay. I'd rather pay for 5 hours less of the professional's time and trust his muscle memory to detail it out. Although maybe we should say, if I was going to do my own shower, it's a totally different feel, and I probably would be like going slow, and it wouldn't be a big deal. So I guess the answer might be like, yeah, maybe, and maybe you said this, like, go for it if someone wants to.
I mean, if you're doing your own shower, you don't care about labor costs.
You don't care about time.
It's your labor.
It's time.
Yeah. Right. So if you spend 3 weeks in a shower and you saved yourself $12,000, then great.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, I'm here to make a profit. I'm here to put food on the table. So it takes me more time to do something. I'm going to figure out whichever way is to expedite everything and go that direction.
Cut the time out. Keep the quality up.
And one thing about this video, and actually a lot of the videos that gets lost in translation, people don't realize, is you kind of think you could do all the tile and then all the cleaning, but there's like for example, even with tile, you came and you doing the grout on this day here on the same day that you set these tile, and there's like just all this kind of choppiness that it doesn't come through the camera super well. They think like the guy walks in and just boom, 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 boom. In other words, just like on the shower, there's probably, 6 or 7 different days that you were setting tile up halfway up here, halfway up here. I'm just visualizing how much sense it makes to be like, okay, on Friday morning, we're going to come back and detail everything, as opposed to saying like, oh, we didn't, brush out this exact part of that shower. Right. It simplifies greatly to just not put that on the,
Yeah. I mean, it's, for me, I guess I'm always kind of surprised at what people fixate on in the videos. And I just thought, wow, that's what you guys want to talk. Okay. I mean, that's fine. I mean, to me, it's just a non-issue.
Sure.
It's so much of the repetitiveness for
routine.
Me, that I'm just like, this is how we do it. And
just work.
And then I'm just like, wow, that's interesting to people, or wow, they're upset at me about that. Or wow, it's okay,
funny.
Cool.
Oh, someone asked about the grout, and it's an epoxy grout. You put that Vaseline looking stuff in there. What's that?
So
I think I asked at the time, but what is that?
So epoxy grout is exactly that. Like when you put in a model airplane together, it's a 2-part glue, right? So you have a part A and a part B. That was part A or part B. So you have to mix that component into the body of the grout to start the chemical reaction.
So the body of the grout already has part A or B, and that Vaseline looking stuff is the other.
Correct.
And you just
so
mix
it's
that
like
in.
Every other epoxy. You mix 2 parts, and it gets hard after that happens. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, you have an open time on your on the grout,
and
you better be done
Yeah.
when it's gone.
Yeah. So your dad introduced me to epoxy grout on that shower that I did, and Dave Luger helped me on that shower at my folks. And time was not a consideration. We were so achingly slow,
Right.
and we probably got about 85% as nice a job as you guys would have got in terms of the appearance of the tile. It's very respectable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it works fine and it's waterproof. But man, when he said you're going to use epoxy grout, I thought, holy smokes, Dave! Remember who you're talking to here, you know? And it was so scary at first,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get into a roll and you realize how talk about the vinegar here in a second. But you realize, wow, vinegar in this water makes it wipe off there like magic, and I don't have to be afraid of it. And in some ways, it was easier to get the grout depth with that stuff because it has so much body and it's kind of sticky, and so it'll stay right there. But so, do you have any idea why that vinegar does it? And it's talk about the vinegar and the water that makes epoxy wipeable.
So where I learned that from was actually from a Laticrete seminar that I had gone to for their epoxy grout. They actually send out in their grout powder in 2 packets to clean their product with. One of them, it's the first wash or the initial wash, and then the final wash. And so at this seminar, we're going through this whole thing, and the guy says, well, open up that packet. So we open up the packet. He's like, all right, taste it.
Taste it.
And I'm like, what? I'm like, this has got to be some sort of a nasty chemical. I said, I'm not tasting that. And he says, it's citric acid.
Yeah.
And so what it is it's the acid in the vinegar that helps to cut the resin in the epoxy itself. And so, yeah, all of those little tricks are what makes epoxy grout workable. Because and I use hot water.
I remember. That's right. He had me use warm water. Yeah.
Hot water. It just because epoxy, when it gets cold, it gets hard.
Yeah.
So if you throw cold water on top of it, it's even harder to get tooled down into the right joint depth, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, introducing vinegar, and then the nice thing about it is that not everybody, or Laticrete's the only one that I think sends out any type of cleaning solution with their epoxy grout. So if you just have a jug of vinegar with you, you can pretty much do all epoxy grouts with it. And so, yeah, it makes the initial wash and then the final cleanup so much easier. And I'm not sure, because everybody was really freaked out about epoxy grout on the video. I don't know if they're experiencing an old epoxy grout or whatever the case may be, because the new epoxy grout has become fairly user friendly. It's no longer you got to suit up in this hazmat suit, and be concerned about the fumes and all this kind of stuff. I mean, you have to take your precautions and everything, but it's mainstream for us. I mean, I rarely do a non-sanded or a sanded grout anymore. I'd have to say 99% of my jobs are epoxy grout. Except
you were telling me on ceramic tile because of the halo effect that can happen.
Yeah, certain. So yeah, actually in your bathroom, that tub surround that you'll see a video on, we did use a sanded grout because you can get something called a haloing effect with a soft-bodied ceramic tile, where the resins from that tile or resins from that grout actually penetrate into the sides of the tile itself.
The edges.
Correct.
The not glossy edge.
Correct. The unglazed portion, the ceramic body. And it'll actually wick that resin in, and it'll discolor the in the body of the tile itself. So it looks like a halo all the way around that tile. And there's no way to get it out. It's done. Yeah. And so, so there's certain, obviously, limitations. So a natural stone also, you have to be really careful if you're going to use an epoxy grout, because when you grout like slate with epoxy grout, it looks like you've put an enhancing sealer.
Oh, it gets a little glossy.
The resins, the oils from that grout get into the body of the tile, and it looks a little shiny. And so if that's not what the homeowner wanted, you're in trouble.
Problem.
That's so funny. I've always thought, and this is reminding me, over half of what you get from a professional is you get their skill, the muscle memory, the tools, but knowing these details about how materials interact and which one to use is so valuable.
It
and
is.
man, like even a guy going to DIY a shower, here's like a bunch of mistakes that you just rattled off that could have nuked the shower.
Yep.
That's amazing. And it's just reminding me how valuable that is. Like, I guess that's part of experience, but it's just that accumulation of of things that can go wrong that you probably learned the hard way. But
exactly, that's exactly it. If you've learned these things, you've learned them because you enhanced a slate floor that wasn't supposed to be enhanced, and all of a sudden you're like, is this okay?
And Mrs. Micklehenney said, take that out.
Exactly. And so, absolutely. You pay for that person's experience as much as you pay for that person's skill set.
That's right.
Yeah. You know? And so, but talking about the DIYers. So one of the biggest comments out there about the Schluter product was how expensive it is.
Yeah.
And it goes back to exactly what we were talking about. If you're setting your own shower and you're trying to save money, there are cheaper ways to go, right? Mm-hmm. But again, you introduce a bunch of different installer errors that could possibly happen, you know? Mm-hmm. And so you really do have to weigh out when it comes down to cost, is the savings worth the risk?
Time.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, it is a time thing because it shaves down the amount of time it takes me to get the preparatory work in my shower. It shaves almost 2 days off of my prep time.
Bam.
Wow.
Bam.
And so those are the types of things that is it when just from an initial, if you walk into Home Depot and you see Hardybacker here for $13 a sheet, and then you see a sheet of foam over at, wherever else, and it's $100 a sheet. Yeah. You're like, whoa, obviously I'm going to go over here, but now you got to make sure that you've got the correct waterproofing to go over the top of that, the vapor barrier behind, all these different types of things. So, it's definitely a give and take as far as which product you want to use. Yeah. And like I said, they all work when installed properly.
So let's roll it back around to Dave. And I don't, is this somehow, I hope this is, he is Mr. Miyagi. Okay. Okay. He is Mr. Miyagi. His personality is bam, do it like this, grasshopper. Okay. And he really knows. And I, as I got to know him better a few years ago, I thought, wow, what a unique personality. I mean, he's unassuming. He drives old vehicles. He gets out and his tools are worn. And he doesn't cut. I mean, customer satisfaction is great, but he will also, a couple times with me as a customer, would tell me exactly how it is. No, you really don't want to do that. He doesn't brook fools easily, right? And so I just, your dad's all right. I wish he was here, but probably he's a little more allergic to cameras than we are.
You know what? I could not have learned from a better person.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm going to be partial. It's my dad.
Sure.
But, he's definitely set in certain ways about like customer care and, making sure that you have the correct, that you're following the rules essentially. But as far as innovation goes, he was actually the one that more pushed for Schluter than me.
Interesting.
So I think he saw the validity of their product in our company and saw maybe what it was age.
An older man, Yeah, let's make it easier, son.
Let's not pack, 50-pound sheets in. Let's pack 12-pound sheets in, or whatever the case may be. So maybe that's what it was, or maybe it was the fact that it fit into our scope well. But he's been the guy that's always been like, let's check out this new product. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's try this.
Yeah.
And it's actually been me more kind of digging my heels in going, well, why don't we just stay with what we're doing? I mean, it seems to be working just fine. And he's like, no, he's the one that always wants to go to the trade shows and,
Interesting.
And now I see the benefit to that. But early on, I really didn't see the benefit. I'm like, hey, we're doing just fine here. Why do I need to go off and see what everybody else is doing?
Interesting.
And here we are.
Something you told me that, and I guess I would have guessed this in sort of intuitively, but at some point somebody pointed out to you that 5 recent real estate listings for houses for sale had in the description of the property tile work by Dave Who. How about that? In a town this size, that's not nothing. That is not nothing. Okay.
I don't even know how to respond to that. It's
Yeah.
it's when I saw that. Well, my my dad says that's stupid. It's cool.
It
I
is
mean,
cool.
it's cool. I guess I just don't see us in that capacity.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
I
And neither does he, but somebody does. You know,
apparently
Yeah,
so.
That's
you know,
awesome.
and so it's cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, Phil. And like I said, viewers, we got one more tile video, and I think we'll find a way to put some of this information in there. We'll see how it goes, but
And you might get a chance to see Phil when he was 9.
yeah, well, we'll definitely share those pictures. Those are pretty classic and cool. Although you probably weren't having all that much fun when the pictures are being taken, but looking back,
Not so much in those pictures. No.
All right, Phil. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing our tile work. And if you missed those episodes, by the way, everybody, you 100% have to watch them. 100%. They're not skippable. It's this whole trade that is worldwide. This is like one of like the titans of tradesmen, lore. The tile setter. And so watch this, get a feel for what the trade's like, and then you'll know a lot more than we were able to cover here. So thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, Phil.